Welcome. Today I've got Zach Staten in on for the video. Zach, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well. So today, this video, I just wanted to just talk about the Vancouver Canucks and just talk about their off season and what we can expect in this upcoming season. Just gonna start. Who's your favorite all-time Canuck?
Oh man. I mean, you know what? It's kind of tough with Vancouver because there's so many to look at. I think Pavel Bure was one where how he came over, his story to Vancouver, what he did for a long time. I know people that might be a little bit of a touchy topic because he did leave Vancouver. So I guess if it's more of a one that's more current. I mean, I love Quinn Hughes. This guy can walk a line, he can shoot puck, and
Yeah,
man, can he make a play? But I mean, all time, I'd probably say Pavel Bure, just legend.
yeah, Bure is quite a legend. Like what he did for Vancouver and just his goal scoring ability, which is awesome back in the '90s and just nothing like they saw before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're gonna get started today. Obviously, the biggest moves for the Canucks this offseason, obviously trading for Evander Kane. Kane did not play the 2024-25 season. The year prior he had 44 goals, including 24 goals. Um yeah, what do you think we can expect out of Evander Kane? Obviously he is a playoff player. Like he's a player you want on your team coming into the playoffs. He was great for Edmonton on their two cup runs. And what do you think he can provide for the Canucks?
Well, the biggest thing about Vancouver is that you need to get back into some sort of rhythm, right? Like you take a season where you go to the second round, you right to Game 7, you lose to the Edmonton Oilers. Next year, things just it feels like they fall apart, right? Elias Pettersson doesn't look like the same player that he was before, even though it went from 102 to 89 and then below 50. And then you're looking at the back end, like you need to have a year where Quinn Hughes may look at this team and say, "Yeah, I want to stay here and maybe not go play with my brothers or go play somewhere else." And Evander Kane, I'm not going to say he's going to be this massive needle mover. However, when you look at the presence that he brings just strictly on the ice, he can cause havoc, like right
Yeah.
in people's heads and on the ice. Like he can make things happen. He can facilitate plays. Obviously, age is going to be a factor in this. However, you place him on that second line, maybe a little bit of shelter in minutes, put him in front of the net on the power play if you want. I think he can make something happen on this Vancouver Canucks team. How big of an impact it's going to be compared to guys. So you just you bring back Brock Besser and a guy you thought you were going to lose. Connor Garland had a really good year last year. Maybe Jacob DeBrusk can kind of find his game again along with Elias Pettersson. I think that Kane will be a nice addition to that wing. But I'd be interested to see if other guys may be able to take over that second line wing spot as well. Like maybe it's Niels Hoglander, right? Maybe he comes in and makes a splash. I don't expect Drew O'Connor or Sazen or Shearwood to do anything, but if he's in that second or third line area, I'd expect him to make some type of impact. It just depends on how many games you're going to get from him.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Kane, he's a huge physical force. He's a great power forward, even as he is a 35-year-old player. Going back to Elias Pettersson, he did not have a great year at all. 46 points, just did not look like the same player, was not confident with the puck, was not shooting as much as he usually does. Do you think people are giving up on Elias Pettersson too early?
You know what? I'd be guilty of the fact that I feel like I've given up on him a bit. I wouldn't say I've said this guy's absolutely washed. He's not going to be able to find his game again. But for Elias Pettersson, I think the biggest thing that nobody talks about is that he gets in his head a lot. Like you see that on the ice. We saw that last year. We don't exactly know what happened in the locker room last year, whether it was between JT Miller and him or not. Of course, we think it is, but again, we don't know everything.
Yeah.
But I think some people are giving up on him a bit. Like, you look at some rankings, like I had him at 40. I was probably should have had him a little bit higher.
Mhm.
But, some people are saying that he is just washed. Like he shouldn't be in Vancouver. They need to move on from him. Like we saw all these rumors of him possibly being dished over to the Buffalo Sabres
Yeah.
and then them giving the Canucks whatever back. There really wasn't much to go from here. For Elias Pettersson, it's about just playing a simple game, starting there and seeing how he can progress because a 102-point player doesn't just go away in a couple of seasons, right? Even
Yeah.
last year, not looking at the past year, but the year before, 89 points. You can still do that. Now, it's not great to see that type of drop year over year, but this isn't to say that a player like Elias Pettersson, who has this skill, who is just such raw talent. And if he can really just build out his game, try to block out some of the noise, I think is going to be the biggest thing, and just focus on simple aspects of the game, getting the puck out, making a simple pass, being in the right areas and making smart plays, and knowing that maybe he doesn't need to go in the corner. That's not his type of game, but finding open gaps, making things come to him and drawing players to him and then helping out other guys. I think that's going to be the biggest aspect for him. So yeah, people might be underrating him a bit, and maybe, pushing him off. But I think that for the most part, it's a year where he has to prove himself for multiple reasons, not just for himself, but as I mentioned, Quinn Hughes for himself too, right? Trying to get him to stay here, so maybe there could be a successful future in Vancouver as he signed a long-term deal, right? So,
Yeah.
not just being him, but for management and everything else, it's going to be a big year for him, and I expect something to happen.
Yeah, me as well. He at least needs to have like over a point per game season, at least like an 85 to 87 point season for this Canucks team to continue their offensive dominance that they had just a couple seasons ago. Brock Besser, they brought back. It was a huge shock on on free agency day, signed a 7-year deal at $7.25 million. Besser had 50 points, including 25 goals in his 75-game campaign in the 2025 season. What do you think we can expect out of him? Do you think he can come back to his 40-goal season he had just 2 years ago?
I think this is the one thing where it kind of ties into who you're going to be playing with, right? Like
Yeah,
the Vancouver Canucks are not the team that they were a couple of years ago, where they made that push to the second round and possibly almost the conference or the Western Conference Finals, right? So
yeah,
for Brock Besser, he can definitely get up there. He has that scoring touch. Now, is he going to be able to get 40 goals? I can see it. It is a little bit of a long shot. I think you could project about 30 to 35, which is still very good for the production that you're going to get. I don't think it's absolutely out of this world to assume that, but at the same time, right? Like, you can try to produce as much as you want, but again, the teammates that are around you are going to have to produce that as well, right? So
yeah.
going back to Elias Pettersson, is he going to be that same guy? And if so, then Brock Besser is definitely going to flourish from that, right? How is Jake DeBrusk, if he's going to be on that line, how is he going to help facilitate that? And if not, then who else is he going to be playing with? Like, do we see Brock Besser drop down with a guy like Philip Hedl? I hope not. I don't think he's going to do as well there. And again, Hedl's availability is going to be in question throughout the season.
Yeah.
So, 40 goals might be a little bit ambitious. I could see it, but I think a 30 to 35 might be a little bit more realistic. And if he goes more from there, then you got to be pretty happy as a Canucks fan to see that again, especially on the contract that you gave him. You're hoping to see at least the same consistency or better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Obviously, signing a deal like that when there was just so much rumors of trade when the Canucks went downhill, he's got to see something in this group. Obviously, we've seen Elias Pettersson. He's said he wants revenge, and he's working quite hard this offseason. He played with Jake DeBrusk most of the year. DeBrusk tied Besser for the team lead in points. What are your thoughts on Jake DeBrusk? Like, do you think he's going to take a step in his game if everything else goes right with Elias Pettersson?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, the thing is with Jake DeBrusk, it was interesting when they first signed him. It was 7 years, $5.5 million. Like, this guy was coming from Boston to Vancouver. You, as a Vancouver Canucks fan, I mean, I was excited. I was thinking that maybe he would look at the Leafs. There was a lot of rumors around there.
Mm,
It seemed like a lot for him. It was Canadian teams. I don't know
yeah,
why that was the whole thing. But for Jake DeBrusk, he has the ability to show up in big moments. We saw that in Boston. This guy was a killer for some teams. And, him being tied for the team lead for the Canucks last year, maybe not say a lot as a whole for a team that really did underperform. But I
mm,
think that does say a lot for a guy in Jake DeBrusk who stepped up when he needed to,
yeah,
took on that role of trying to produce more and really take that next step. So, I mean, for how are we going to see him this year on a line that presumably is DeBrusk, Pettersson, and Brock Besser? I think it's going to be something similar. I mean, again, like you talk about how Elias Pettersson is looking for this so-called blood, right? Like, he wants to prove his haters wrong.
yeah,
Jake DeBrusk, right? He just wants to have a good year because he wants to win. A lot of players just want to win, right? They
yeah,
want they sign these contracts. Sometimes it means about the money, but for Jake DeBrusk, I mean, you can't really be mad about how you produced last year and say like I'm looking for like a 60 70 point season, right? I think he had, what was it, about 48 points, 50 points.
Yeah.
So if you're getting that same production out of him for 5.5 million, 50 points, I'm pretty happy with that. So maybe not like another step. If there's another step, that's great. But if he's doing the same thing as he did last year, I wouldn't be that mad about 5.5 million for 50 points.
Yeah, I would, in my opinion, I would not be totally upset. Like 5.5, that's the average price for like a middle six winger at this point with the cap going up. Um, Talk about Canucks depth. They made a push for Marco Rossi. They offered the 15th overall pick and a roster player at the draft for Marco Rossi. He just signed a bridge deal of 5 years, or sorry, $5 million for 3 years. Um, do you think Phil, like with Filipino, his health and his availability, he's dealt with concussion issues. Um, it's gonna be really tough. Like the Canuck depth. Do you see them making a push for like because they need a second line center if they want to be a steady playoff team? Do you see them making a move before the trade deadline, or do you see them making in like the next month or so?
Well, the toughest thing about the Vancouver Canucks is that they've been like, I think we're all pretty aware of the rumors of how many teams, I should say, have been looking for a second line center, including Vancouver. Uh, with Philip Hedl, it's so rough because this is a guy who has a lot of talent, but it's been blocked by injuries his whole career. Like we saw that the whole time in New York.
Mm-hmm.
His concussions have been just awful. And you know what? It seems like he's kind of had a plateau here where things have kind of evened out. And I hope that happens for him and he can find his game again. But he's not a second line center. It's just not. He's probably a third line steady guy as long as he can stay healthy,
Mm-hmm.
who can produce. That's great. For Vancouver, this is the biggest thing, right? Like you want to be able to make this a place enticing. All right. I know I kind of keep bringing this up, but it is the biggest piece of news for the Vancouver Canucks for this year. And especially next, if nothing happens, is Quinn Hughes, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is arguably, if for me, I think one of the better, if not the 1-2 best defensemen in the NHL. This guy can get up to 100 points. He can carry a blue line. This guy can skate. He can shoot. He can make a play. He sees plays so much farther than others.
Yeah.
So when you talk about adding a second line center, especially in a market like this, it's going to be tough, right? Because you're going to have to give out, maybe some prospects, maybe some picks. And then now you have to weigh in. So is Vancouver in a spot where they should be doing that? Well, if you're going to go get a good second line center, you're probably going to have to give up first. Not many teams want to do that with a Gavin McKenna draft, right?
Yeah.
And then you look to next year, okay, maybe some teams will do that. Maybe they'll take it on. I could see them wanting to do it and making that trade. Obviously, they've been involved in looking around.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this all depends on how they start, right? Like you can just say, oh, I want a second line center and I really hope it happens. But at the same time, you can always say so much, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it, right? There's a lot of teams that have been looking for that 2C guy. Like Toronto was doing it for a long time. They eventually, it sounds like that they settled on Tavares, who's still a very productive second line C. Didn't really think they needed to do that. Montreal, they're looking for a second line center because Kirby Dach, let's be honest, it's kind of the same as Philip Hedl.
Yeah.
Injuries, right? So for the Vancouver Canucks, maybe a month in, if things are going well and they can find a price and some guys aren't working out in different areas, then like, okay, let's cut bait. It's rare you're going to see that early season. You might have to wait a couple of months.
Yeah.
But if they can find a deal and they like a guy enough and they'll pay for that, sure. But this might be one of those areas, and I think this looks at a lot of other teams who have been trying to add and even just trying to trade other guys, is they're going to wait. They're going to stand put. They're going to see how training camp goes out because maybe there's a guy on this Vancouver Canucks roster that takes that step. Maybe Philip Hedl is healthy and he looks great and he could be that second line center, right? And then you don't have to worry about Atsurati or Teddy Bluger at that 3-4 spot, right? So I think it's just a waiting game right now. And that just means even if you're going to wait to see how things go or just waiting to see how the market kind of fizzles out. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I wouldn't say they don't do it and go look at a second line center. Of course they have, but I think a lot about it is just price and honestly availability in the market right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think they're probably gonna wait because teams aren't gonna make their players available until they fully see like what their team has done and what they're capable of. So we probably won't see that around like a December or January. We saw news of a Jack Roslovic potential signing, but that's fizzled out as the asking price was just too much for the Canucks. What do you think the Canucks are missing out on with a Jack Roslovic? Do you think they're going to get more out of a guy like an Atu Ratu or a Linus Karlsson? Do you think that was the right move walking away from a guy like Jack Roslovic?
It's Jack Roslovic is a very interesting one because he's really the best option on the market. So he doesn't have to take the first deal that comes to him, right? Like there's a lot of teams that have been looking hard, and that's including the Canucks, who recently have seemed to just walk away a bit and maybe see how things kind of go, and maybe that means wait till training camp, and which is coming up very soon.
Yeah.
For Jack Roslovic, you're missing out on good depth, right? This is a guy who not too long ago, like had back-to-back 40-point seasons with the Columbus Blue Jackets, right? Like this was 45, 44. He was scoring 20 goals in some of these years. And like he is a guy who can produce in the right area and do what you need him to do. Now, for Jack Roslovic, you're going to have to make this balance, right? Like he hasn't exactly been the most consistent guy. Some of these years he's been hurt, and that's a big factor when you're going to be giving him a little bit of term. So probably about 2 to 3 years at about, let's just say at minimum 3 million to as high as 375, right? So if you're the Vancouver Canucks and you're trying to figure out your roster and you say, okay, so where are we going to put Jack Roslovic? Like probably going to fit on like that third line. Maybe he slips on to the second line and you just move Garland over to the left wing. Probably wouldn't want to do that. But then where do you go from here? Because now you're taking out a young guy's spot who could be a good producer at a low number, and you can add to other spots when needed, right? So for the Vancouver Canucks, you're missing out on good depth. It's pretty solid middle six depth who can score, who can produce, and could be a little bit of a electricity like kind of force in this lineup that might need a jolt. I don't think you're missing on like that much. This isn't one of those cases where you're like, okay, well, I don't really want to offer Mikko Rantanen that money to bring him on our team. This isn't that kind of thing. A little bit of a electricity like kind of force in this lineup that might need a jolt. I don't think you're missing on like that much. This isn't one of those cases where you're like, okay, well, I don't really want to offer Mikko Rantanen that money to bring him on our team. This isn't that kind of thing, obviously. Yeah. But 39 points last year. He had 22 goals. It was a pretty good season and almost fully healthy season. I think he actually sat out maybe the last game, but a fully healthy season on Jack Roslovic. So teams are right to be excited about the possibility of adding him, but a lot of teams are also cautious, right? Do we want to give him term, right? Do we want to really give him that money, or would we rather have this flexibility of cap, which has been so vital in these years of even when you're bad, you can take on contracts for assets, or when you're good, it's just the flexibility of having that cap space. You don't have to go and pay a team, let's say a third round pick, to go and take on 25% or whatever is 75%. Probably wouldn't be that, but just as an example is that you don't have to give assets. So a lot of teams are trying to figure out contracts. Some others maybe just don't want to pay them. I think on the most part, you're just missing out on good scoring, middle six depth.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think he would be the issue to the Cox second line center issue. He played in Carolina last season, and we saw he played all over the lineup. He played top line to even down on the third line. He can play anywhere in your lineup. Personally, you are missing out on good depth, like you said. I think right now, obviously, they're gonna give the spots to Anacho Ratu, hopefully Linus Karlsson, Arshdeep Baines, maybe even a Jonathan Lekaramaki, who was great in the AHL playoffs. Linus Karlsson on the Calder Cup winning team had 26 points in 24 games. He played a bit in the NHL last season. I believe he played 24 games. Had 6 points. He didn't look out of place. He actually looked like he belonged on NHL ice. He's a big guy. He's a guy you would want on your bottom six for him to flourish and develop. And on a good playoff team, you need a goaltender. Thatcher Demko got a 3-year deal at $8.5 million that a lot of people are not too happy with. Me, myself, I'm a bit skeptical. Thatcher Demko, Demko, man. 23 games, went 10-8-3, had an .889 save percentage. Injuries have just really shadowed his ability and what he's been able to do. Thatcher Demko, he's still apparently he's still a bit iffy, but coming into training camp, he will be at training camp. What do you think Thatcher Demko will do in this Canucks lineup this year?
Well, see, that's the thing, right? Like, what will Thatcher Demko do, right? So I think, like, everyone's fair to be very skeptical about this deal. $8.5 million is a lot of money, right? And even with the cap going up for a goaltender, that's like it's a decent chunk of change even for 3 years. And we also have to factor in that there's a no movement clause,
Yeah.
right? And then you look at Kevin Lankinen, who also has a no movement clause for this year and next, and then it's a partial modified no trade. So for the Vancouver Canucks, they put themselves in a position where they've kind of anchored their goaltending and said, okay, this is what we're going to go with. And this is kind of how I see it. Am I a fan of giving $8.5 million to a goaltender who, on 1 year he looks like and has looked like that Vezina caliber goaltender who can carry a team, and then other times he's looking like, oh my God, this guy can't touch the ice without breaking a bone or getting hurt or pulling a hamstring. It's an interesting balance. Now, I think if you're the Vancouver Canucks management and you're looking at this and saying, like, what are we thinking here? Maybe it's one of those 1A, 1B situations. Kevin Lankinen looked pretty good last year. He's 30 years old. This deal's going to take him to, I think it's 34, 35, maybe even something around that, right? And he looked good enough to be playing at least half of those games, at least 41 games and not 50-something amount of games. And Thatcher Demko, he can do that when healthy. Now, how is he going to look in this training camp? That's going to be the biggest factor. I think that's one of the more intriguing things, other than the other aspects that we've talked about earlier in this podcast, right? Demko can be that guy, right? Didn't play a lot of games last season. He's 29 years old. He's come on the last year his $5 million contract.
Mm-hmm.
So how I look at it is if Demko can be that guy, then you're going to have to make a couple of choices. One, do you run with Kevin Lankinen, who you have on term at $4.5 million, which isn't terrible, and if he continues to be good, then you run with that. If that's the case, do you look at a situation and say, okay, Thatcher Demko, $5 million, he doesn't have his no movement clause hasn't kicked in until next year. Do we make a kind of a thought of maybe pushing him to go and trade and find a goalie in this market that a team needs? I wouldn't be against that. I think that was my biggest thought in the offseason was why was nobody thinking of Thatcher Demko in the trade market? I'm sure teams checked in on him, even with that injury kind of bug that he's been having the last bit and even just his whole career. But then you just say, okay, well, they also sign him. So would they really want to move him if he's doing that well? And now you want to keep him because he's kind of living up to that money? For Demko, it's all about health. And I think it's all going to be about situation, right? Are the Canucks, if the Canucks are halfway through the season, they're not doing great, but Demko's looking good, do you have that thought? Is the price going to be good enough where you say, we might have just signed him, he doesn't want to be here, and it's tough to get guys to stay here sometimes. Do we just want to keep him and just that's how it goes from here? Or do we say, okay, well, this team's offering us, example, a first and a pretty good prospect and whatever else, should we have this conversation? I think there might be that thought, right? Are they going to do that? Maybe, probably not because they gave him that term. But for Demko, he can be that good. He can be that goaltender that can carry you. And if you want to run that 1A, 1B situation, that's great for his health anyway. So that's going to be the biggest thing. $9.5 million this year combined, and then 13 next year. That's going to be another aspect I think they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just tying down $4.5 million to a backup like Kevin Lankinen pushed out Artur Silovs. Now, Silovs won the Calder Cup playoff MVP with a .931 save percentage. He, as we remember, he did play in the Stanley Cup playoffs in the 2023-24 season. He was a fan favorite. He was great on that Canucks run. Just the next season, he did not look the same with Demko being out with injury. He was the backup. He did not look too great at the NHL level, and with the trade to Pittsburgh, he had no role on this team. And losing a goalie like Artur Silovs, who was so great in the AHL and looked like he could become an NHL starter, what do you think the Canucks are missing out on with Artur Silovs being out of the city?
Well, what he showed at the AHL level, we've been seeing for a bit now, right? This guy, it feels like it's kind of like a similar situation to Devon Levi in Buffalo, who has dominated the AHL, has looked great. But when you place him in an NHL situation, for the most part, they haven't looked good. They've had their year and a little bit where they've kind of dominated and looked like this young stud goaltender that could be good. And that's not to say that they won't be. However, what we saw over the last couple of seasons is just a goaltender who's not ready. He needed some more time. And maybe this past year, where he wins a Calder Cup, is the MVP, looked absolutely dominant, carried that Canucks team in some aspects, and some other guys they definitely helped out too. Of course, we talk about Archie Baines, who looked really good. Lektor Mackey, he looks like he's kind of bringing himself along on this team, and there's a couple of other guys that I'm not mentioning that look great.
Yeah.
The Canucks are, I don't, it's a tough situation, because when you look at this deal that they had to make, it's the balance, right? Like, are you going to bet on a guy like Demko, who, he's looked like that Vezina caliber goalie in years past? He can be consistent. He can be that guy, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
you say, okay, well, he's had his injuries, and then we look at Shelovs and how he's doing in the playoffs. Oh God, like, you have to kind of juggle a bit here and say, what am I going to bet on here, right? Am I going to bet on health? Am I going to bet on just a young goaltender?
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough spot to be in, right? So if you're the Vancouver Canucks, they kind of put themselves in a tough situation here, and I feel like they could have gotten more for Shelovs if they made this decision earlier, but they rabbit holed themselves, right? Like, you give Demko a deal, you send him off, you get a little bit back. It's not great, but you get what you can kind of salvage. So what they're missing is just a young goaltender who, quite honestly, might have figured it out this year, and they might be missing out on that. And that's just how it goes. Sometimes you swing and you strike out. But for what the Penguins are going to get, they could be getting their future guy, who, I don't know if he's going to be this elite goaltender, but may damn well be a good goaltender, right? So maybe he learns a bit from Tristan Jarry, even though he's been a little bit shaky
Yeah.
over the past bit. But you could just be missing a young goaltender. You also just could be making the right choice in Demko, and maybe this guy has a good career, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, Pittsburgh is not going to be a great team. They're going to be in the run for Gavin McKenna, but I think he's going to learn in a market like Pittsburgh, because they're not competing for a cup, so he's not going to deal with the stress of playoffs, but he's going to get to learn NHL puck, and he's going to get to learn how it goes in the NHL. We go back to depth with that Calder Cup winning team, Abbotsford Canucks. Atu Ratu, they got from the Warhammer trade just a few years ago. Will he be a solid bottom six center? And Archie Baines, who we have seen at the NHL level these past couple of years, these guys, they look great most of the time on that bottom six of the Vancouver Canucks. Will they be the option for this team to finally push into the playoffs again?
Well, you know what? The thing is that Ratsu has had, some good kind of progress in his career. Like, this is a former second round pick in 2021. I believe he had, it wasn't too much, it was maybe like 10 or 11 points last year in a handful of, well, maybe not a handful of games, maybe like a 30 game pace that he had for the Vancouver Canucks. He didn't look bad. Now, he was playing about bottom 6 minutes, nothing too crazy, but he was producing on a $775,000 that he's going to have for this year next. It's not anything crazy, but if you're going to get value out of that, then you're absolutely happy about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Abbotsford Canucks, right, this is a guy who's almost a point per game. There was a time to bring him up. Like, I'm pretty sure he had about 40 and 40. Maybe it was about a couple of games just under a point per game.
Yeah.
But, he could score. He could make a pass, and he looked comfortable. And for the Vancouver Canucks, you say, okay, I'm going to throw you in that third line position. Hopefully you grow. I'm going to put some guys beside you who can help, and we'll see how it goes. You don't want to just throw him in. I think he's projected to be playing on a line with, I think it's like Kiefer Sherwood, which is great because he's going to be hitting everything in sight. And then you see a guy, Niels Hoglander, who can definitely rip a puck. So you're excited about that. And then you look at a guy like Archie Baines, right? He, in a small amount that he had last year with Vancouver Canucks, like pretty small, he was looking pretty good, right? Like, this was a guy, he was confident in his game, definitely looked confident in the AHL level, but it wasn't confident enough. Like, he wasn't consistent enough. Like, he had that time where, he was making a couple of good plays, but just through a long enough time, it just wasn't that consistent for Archie Baines. Like, it's going to take some time for him to continue to be that guy that they need. Now, you go look at the AHL level. Again, this is a guy almost a point per game. I think he was a bit worse than Ratsu in terms of point per game, but He was good. Again, more of a playmaker than a shooter, but definitely one that eventually I think maybe he needs a little bit more seasoning in the AHL before he can come up and play in the NHL. But this is a guy who can definitely contribute. Maybe not this upcoming year. I think that maybe looking for a guy like Ramaki who can maybe take that step. You're hoping if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, he's going to take that step. But Archie Bains, you're excited, but I wouldn't say this year upcoming. But I'm happy to be wrong.
I agree with that. I just think they have too many like NHL guys in the way, like a Nils Höglander, like a Teddy Bluger, for a guy like Baines to come up and show what he has in the NHL. Yeah. So that's gonna be it for today. Thank you for coming on. And the final
Of
question,
course.
in your opinion, is the Vancouver Canucks a playoff team at this point in time?
Ooh, well, I think I did when I did my earlier. I think it was my way too early standings predictions for each division. I think I actually might have had them out. I'm not exactly sure. Like the Pacific is so tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at the Edmonton Oilers, Vegas is in there, and then you kind of look at the other teams, right? You have like LA. Like what are they going to look like this year with that defense core? I still think they'll make playoffs, but I don't know what you're going to be doing the whole time. You're going to have guys step up. You look like Seattle, Calgary, right? Some of these teams are definitely going to make pushes. I think I had them maybe just missing. But that's not to say I don't think they could do it. As we've talked about in this whole podcast, this is a team that is looking to kind of make this turn. Is hungry, right? They talk about like we talked about Elise Pettersson, who is looking for blood, wants to be better, right? What about Demko, right? Like we kind of talked about how he's obviously trying to have a better season, gets that big contract, but he definitely wants to prove himself again. This is a guy who's probably been absolutely ripped online for how he's been hurt, and now when he comes back, he hasn't really been that consistent or that good, right? And then you just have that hungriness of the young players that are be coming up, right? I assume that Niels Höglander is going to want to take a step.
Yeah.
Feels like he's been trying to break through for a long time. So we'll see how this one goes. I could see it, but right now, just with how I'm feeling about Vancouver. There's a lot going on. We'll see, but I'll project miss, unfortunately.
Yeah. Not just me being the biased Canucks fan that I am. I had them making the playoffs over the LA Kings, which I got a lot of slack for. I just this Canucks decor, I think that is the most consistent part about them. Is just their defense. Bringing in a guy like Marcus Pettersson, who is one of the best defensive defensemen in the league, can get the puck out of the zone, and he's just looks great on the puck. Tyler Myers on a new 3x3 that he signed last season. He's really found his game in Vancouver. He's looked a lot better, and just the bottom pair of a Derek Forbort and a Elias Nils Pettersson, and obviously the Sampio Joseph, he's going to be the seventh defenseman, probably going to play in Abbotsford for most of the year. I think that's the biggest factor, and honestly, if everything goes right, that'll be their biggest like shining star of the team is their defense. And LA just doesn't really do it for me with Cody Ceci and the Brian Dumoulin's, and just not giving a chance to Brant Clark, who's playing under Drew Doughty and might even play under a Cody Ceci. I had the Canucks make the playoffs, which hopefully that happens. I really want this Canucks team to make the playoffs and make a run. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
Of course, I know what I agree. I think that the defense core could be a very nice bright spot. I'm probably a bigger fan of Philip Peronic than most people. I think
Yeah.
he gets a lot of flack, but yeah, I do like the defense core. I think that the bottom pair could be a very interesting one to watch for.
hmm Yeah, I agree with that. Derek Forbort they brought back on, I think it was just over $2 million, and he didn't look half bad in Vancouver, even when they were going downhill. Like he was great on the puck, and he's a guy that on a playoff team is quite well. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today. Thank you for coming on. Really
Of
appreciate
course,
it. No, I'm not like a huge count
happy to come on.
trying to build it up and watching your content for quite a while now, and wanted to have you on for a video.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to come on. I'm happy